Ladies and gentlemen, everyone from Michigan, great to have you. It's Football Scoop podcast. We're here to do a little special episode on the purported cheating that has been happening within the Michigan football program, particularly with regards to Connor Stallions, the former Navy, perhaps Marine Corps captain, who has been volunteering with the program for many, many years. I think I read 2015 through 2022, became paid in 22-23, has been accused by many of stealing signs, scouting in advance, scouting not the team, but the signal callers, and then figuring it out thereafter. Zach Barnett, John Bryce, Doug Samuels, the whole group is here. Zach, lead us off. Give us the background, and then we'll dive into what's happening and where we go from here.
Yeah, so I think you did a good job setting it up, and so that's kind of where we were heading into the weekend. Was that we learned of this Connor Stallions uh, figure, now the most infamous man in college football, and then Monday, ESPN reported kind of the mo of how he ran his operation and how the NCAA and the Big Ten learned about it. So, reportedly, 11 different Big Ten schools say that Stallions himself or someone working on behalf of Stallions was visited their stadiums. He purchased the tickets just like anybody else through StubHub, SeatGeek, under his own name with his credit card. Sometimes there was, I believe, at least one instance where a opposing Big Ten school saw him himself through their own in stadium surveillance. And it also appears, he was purchasing multiple tickets to games on the same day that he had others visit on his behalf. He would often try to sit, lower deck, high ish up, it seems, at the 45-yard line, where he or one of his operatives would then allegedly film the signalers using what we presume to be, a smartphone, iPhone, what have you. Oftentimes, including this past Saturday, he would have tickets uh, on opposing sidelines, so he or someone else could film both teams. As according to the ESPN report, he or someone working on his behalf was scheduled to be at the Ohio State Penn State game, filming both teams because obviously Michigan plays both teams, and so the NCAA has sought access to Stallion's computer, and that appears to be where we're leaving it right now.
All right, give me a little background on Michigan's win-loss totals up to, in the Jim Harbaugh era, up until 2 or 3 years ago, and then these last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, so obviously going into Jim got there 2015, immediately improved the program, and then the team seemed to hit a wall each November. They had not beaten Ohio State under Jim's tenure. 2020, the COVID year, they went 2-4, and there was a prevailing thought that if the Ohio State game had been played that year, Ohio State went on to play for the national title. Michigan went 2-5, and Jim could have very well been fired. He was not. He came back on a contract that reduced his salary in half, made some other changes, some that we learned about very publicly, and some that appears we're just learning about now. But since then, they've lost one Big Ten regular season game. They've won 2 Big Ten championships. They are 4-0 combined against Penn State and Ohio State, and they are the premier team in the conference. And it appears this season, as we sit today, they look like the best team in the entire country.
So 18, 19, 20, they weren't very good. Now it's alleged, and multiple programs say they have documentation of potential cheating, live scouting in the last 3 seasons, and they've been extremely good the last 3 seasons.
That's correct. And so if you are a Michigan rival, which everyone who's not Michigan is a Michigan rival, at this point, you are going to associate all of their success from 2021 through today with the fact that they have, it appears, illegally obtained sensitive information from their opponents and violated their own conference opponents to do so.
Bill Belichick, widely regarded as one of, if not the best NFL head coaches of all time, but you've got Gates out there. You know, how does this tarnish Jim Harbaugh's tenure at Michigan?
JB, I'll let you take that one.
I think it's an incredible tarnish right now, and it's going to be that way until something either entirely vindicates Harbaugh and the rest of his upper-ranking staff, or it's only going to get worse if there are documentation, paper trails, and all of that that further leads back to complicity and culpability at basically all levels of the Michigan football program. I think it's an incredible tarnish, especially coming on the heels of this is a guy who opened the season on suspension. This is a guy that tried to plea out a deal with the NCAA, and the NCAA said, "Nah, we're good. We're going to run this one out for a little bit." And it makes you wonder how long the NCAA has known about this. Another key thing that I'm told as of yesterday by a college executive who works with a number of programs across the country, he said, "Look, the NCAA is actually learning some new information from the reporting that's going on out there. All the information that the NCAA already had, and it was enough to feel confident in what it was doing, is still being added to by some of the reporting, by some of what ESPN has done, by some other stuff that they have received that has broken out." And so I think that's significant. The fact that, he point blank said, there's a bunch of new stuff coming out in the media that's new to the NCAA, separate from what they already had on Michigan. I think that's very significant. So I don't think you can overstate the magnitude that this has on the perception right now of Jim Harbaugh, especially if you look at the timeline moment between 2020 to 21 and what that program has done here forward, how fractured relationships were between Harbaugh, Ward, Manuel, and everyone else in between 20 and 21, and then his overt flirtations with the NFL also during that time period. So then you have all that as a backdrop, and you have a guy that has flaunted COVID rules, whether it was a big deal or not. You flaunted COVID rules in a time that there was no recruiting. There were so many dead periods for so long for everybody. We saw the flaunting of the recruiting dead period be a part of what was so very detrimental at Tennessee, along with just Jeremy Pruitt being boneheaded. But again, it all ties into the NCAA hates it when you flaunt the rules. They know everybody breaks the rules. And the other thing that I would point out, and Doug can really attest to this, in football like baseball, I think there's some natural sign stealing, so to speak. Like if you've got a guy on second base and he's able to pick up what the catcher is signaling in and tips it off to the batter, that's one thing. But when you bring technology into it, when you have what is like a CIA type of task force working for you in stadiums throughout your rivals' footprint, then that's an entirely different level. That ratchets it up to well beyond gamesmanship and flat out cheating, and that's the allegation here.
Well, let's come to the in-game stuff in a minute, Doug. But first, I want to come at this from the money trail. So I don't know much about Connor Stallions, but I've seen pictures of him, young guy. He was in the military for a number of years. And then it's being reported he volunteered with Michigan football from like 15 to 22. So my point there is he's not making a lot of money. And then his reported salary is $55,000 in 2023. How does a guy who is volunteering for the program or just making $55,000 in Ann Arbor, how does he afford to pay all these people to take videos and buy all these tickets? And how does he have the financial wherewithal to make this all happen? Any thoughts on that? Where does the money come from?
I mean,
And how does that play into this?
To me, it seems like there's two explanations in that he's independently wealthy, which I don't know. I didn't know this person existed until Thursday, so I can't speak to that. Or someone along the way is reimbursing him. And so it seems to be the other shoe here is that if you're Jim Harbaugh, Ward Manuel, and your athletics department was reimbursing this person, then you can't then argue that you didn't know what they were doing or that they weren't acting on your behalf. So the NCAA does not have subpoena power. It's possible that this could be off Michigan's books, but to me, that's the biggest unanswered question as of right now.
So I think you have two paths there. If it's on the books, like you're saying, in other words, if Michigan reimbursed them, the University of Michigan reimbursed them, oh my goodness. Whoever signed off on that, whoever processed that, whoever sent that to payables, whoever processed it, compliance approved it, the audit team comes behind them and says, hey, what was this? Hey, what was this? Give me your documentation. Whoever approved all of that, and if there was any travel involved, travel, athletic department, all those people lose their jobs. And then there's the oversight and the management, the sport administrator, and this gets to the top. This gets to Ward Manual. This impacts everyone's career if it's on the books. If it's off the books, in other words, if somebody with deep pockets said, "Hey, why don't you figure out the signals? That'll really give us a thing, and I'll give you money off the side." That would have to be somebody making a lot of money who could just fund, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, and that kind of stuff. It's a lot of money. That if that ever gets figured out, whoo, buddy, that person's blackballed from the profession, is the way I see it. I mean, am I wrong in this?
No, I think they definitely get blackballed. But as I saw someone point out, I don't know if it was social media or whatever, but Connor Stallions probably finds a job in corporate espionage or something, and something straight out of Billions or something on HBO.
It doesn't seem like he was very good at corporate espionage, though.
This is multi-year, premeditated, well-funded. This is a scandal for Michigan football, I think.
Yeah, and to say he's not pretty good, he certainly here in hindsight, we can Monday morning quarterback him or Tuesday morning, whatever, quarterback him and say, oh well, he should have used different names, different credit cards, all of that. But if the scheme has been going on now for 3+ years or in its third year, then I'd say that's a pretty effective scheme. A couple of other things I should note that I've had indicated to me that I think we're all still checking on. It's been indicated to me that he may have gone so far as to purchase tickets at potential playoff opponents for Michigan, that he looked to maybe get tickets to an SEC game in case that the Wolverines were going to wind up facing somebody like a Georgia, or if the SEC had gotten a second team into the playoffs last year. It's been indicated to me that he may have made attempts to buy tickets for additional games outside of the Big Ten footprint, which I think is really interesting as well.
All right, Doug, now let's transition to in-game. All right, you figure out the signals in advance. And, first quarter, you're making sure you know who's hot, who's calling it. All right, and you're like, I got this. Now you got to do something with that. So let's think through Michigan's defense, right? You're playing Ohio State and you see the call. How do you, as Michigan's defensive coordinators or Michigan's defensive players, take action with that information?
I think it's really tough to do, even if you're playing a huddle team who, let's say, gives you the most time to decipher the call, decide what you want your call to be. And that's only half the equation. Now you got to get that down to the field in time. You got to trust that your players get lined up where they're supposed to be and execute the call. There's so many moving parts to make that work. I don't want to discount sign stealing, but I'm also thinking it from the perspective of a high school coach that's got 5 guys on my defensive staff. I'm not a Michigan that has 30 people twiddling their thumbs on a game day that kind of need something to do. So if they're just dialed in on that, but there's a number of things I think coaches do to try and limit what gets out there. You've got guys giving signs to certain positions. It's not one guy giving all of it. It's this guy's got the O-line signal, this guy's got the receiver signal, this guy's got the protection, this guy, so there's a number of different ways coaches get creative. I know I've talked to Big Ten coordinators over the past few years. They're changing their signals week to week. And I think that's a lot for a college kid to have to remember, this means something different this week than it did last week. But that's the kind of rigmarole they go through to protect their signals. There's a lot of moving pieces to make that happen. But when you got a staff of 30 to 50 guys on game day that aren't really doing anything, they can hone in on that. It's certainly doable.
I called a couple of guys in the Big Ten on not Michigan, at other places yesterday, and spoke with them about this. And the response I got was, from a defensive perspective, the only way this really helps you, you know, play ends, game clock resets, clock's running, offense is making personnel transitions. They're calling their play. Defenses, matching up, calling their defense. Really, the thinking that I heard was defensive coordinators already called his defense. It's if you see the call and it's making this up, if it's tossed to the right, you can relay to the field to your players something like, alert, run left, that kind of thing. And there were some people saying, was there some communication to the players that might have been? There were some people wondering about some other tactics Michigan was using, not necessarily the defensive coordinator calling the right defense. I mean, if Ohio State's running 4 verts, quarterback at the line can check out of that. There's all sorts of things. You can play, I'm going to send this hot blitz, because we think it works in this, but the quarterbacks can change that. If it's a 4th down and it's a run call versus play action, things like that can really help a defense. Other than that, these guys are like, I don't know how much this helps them unless they were cheating and they were saying they were talking to particular guys on the field.
That leads me into one of the questions that I have is that, seeing talk floating around that sign stealing in and of itself is not illegal if you're able to figure it out within the game or through the TV copy or whatever. And the only reason that in-person scouting was illegal, they established the rule against it in 1994, was a cost-saving measure. So if we know those 2 facts and acknowledge those 2 facts, is this really that big a deal if Michigan did this? And so I'm not saying I believe that, but what's y'all's response to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
I mean, I'm 100%. I'm 100% with you, Zach. I think it's probably an outdated rule. It doesn't need to be there, but the fact remains: the rule is the rule. Like, it is currently the rule. It's not like the conversations of the Reggie Bush Heisman where we can proactively give it back to them. No, the rule was the rule at the time. That's the rule that has to be followed. I think long-term implications of this, I think maybe it's a rule that gets scratched a year or 2 down the road. But I also think maybe it changes. Maybe they start to consider in-game communication a little bit more. I think that's the 2-3 years down the road conversation.
That's an excellent point on the in-game conversation or communication, Doug. And that's a conversation that I've had over the last few days. And it's already been said, okay, you want to go to helmet headset communication for the quarterback and the coach. And then this guy pointed out to me, and he works with athletics and corporate America. And he said, do you realize how easy it is to also steal that audio, to steal that information if you're in the stadium with the right technology? And now that technology can be so small, that technology can be so obscure that you can take it into your bag with you. As you can say you're listening to whatever with it. You can say you're using it to listen to the radio broadcast of the game, but there are devices out there. And he indicated this is very much the case in corporate situations, that the corporate espionage runs so much deeper than the general public would realize. So I think that's significant in terms of, is it cheating or is it not cheating? Like you said, there's the rule. There's the gamesmanship, which in Little League, no matter how bad we were at it, we tried to figure out if fastball or curveball was coming because I needed all the help at the dish I could get. But that wasn't necessarily cheating. That was trying to be smart. And the same thing is studying film and observing and learning the tendencies of your opponent. I think when it's an alleged conspiracy where you have put together this cabal of people that are going and allegedly recording games and relaying that information to you. And then, Scott, I think you obliquely referenced to this the other just moments ago when you said you talked to people in the Big Ten and they were wondering if there weren't maybe other things going on game day, as in, were there other ways that he was communicating with people on game day? Yeah,
that was the biggest concern. And I almost hesitate to even say it because I don't want to sound conspiracy theorist, but if you're relaying through some other communication method that's specifically outlawed, if they were to find that, that's a game changer. It changes everything. So real fast, Doug, come back to, we talked about defense. Like, if you see Ohio State calling a particular play on offense, defense can respond to that. I just don't know how this helps you on offense. Because offense is calling their play before defense is calling their defense traditionally. I mean, it all happens within a multi-second, within 1 second of each other. But I don't know how this would help the offensive coordinator in Michigan.
So, I mean, you walk into that game with so much information, down and distance, field zone, all that kind of stuff. That's really what's driving your decisions. I think also on the other side of the ball, that coordinator wants to break those tendencies. So if you've got a blitz dialed up in a situation that it's not normally blitzing, but again, we're talking like 5 plays out of 70 or 80 in a game.
It does come to me, though, and I've seen the pictures that all the Ohio State folks are sharing. I see Connor Stallion standing right beside Sharon Moore a lot. And I can understand Sharon calls a play, and it's a fire blitz. And they recognize defense is called fire blitz. Ohio State's bringing everything at us. And quarterback looks over and Sharon goes, hey, check to this and let it ride. And they throw it deep, and they catch him in a weird blitz, and they hit him over the middle touchdown. And you say it's 5 plays, but you win a game on 3 plays,
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I would. I've actually known some sign stealers through the years in SEC country, and then in a footprint beyond that. And I've talked to them about this even before this popped up. I talked about it, and then within the past couple of weeks, the past few days, I've circled around with some of those guys. And I asked them, like, what's a success rate? What makes it worth your while? If you're spending 14 hours of game week trying to figure out the signals and trying to have a sheet going into the game where you feel like you relatively know a fair amount of the time on offense or defense what the opposition is doing, what makes it worthwhile. And he said if you get 1 out of every 3 plays on average, that's considered a success. And this is somebody who had done it at multiple institutions, who just had a gift for it. And I don't think he was doing anything illegal. I think he was in the stadium doing stuff, watching things, making his observations through the week, through film study and things of that. But they talked about the hit rate. You would think, oh, they're stealing signs. They know what to do on every play. No, that's not the case. Another thing that I found really interesting is that one gentleman told me, you also have to have the trust of the coordinator. So you might tell a coordinator right away, hey, this is stretch run left, you better adjust. But if the defensive coordinator has already put his call in and he thinks, this guy says he knows the signal, but does he? And he sticks to his own guns, then that's that. So I think that trust factor is another, you can't necessarily quantify it, but it's a huge element of the equation. And I can tell you that there's been a game this year where a team felt it had the signal stolen. They called it in, and boom, touchdown on 2 different plays where the defense felt it knew what was coming.
And that's another thing here is that Michigan wouldn't have gone through all this trouble over 3 seasons if they didn't feel like it was worth their while. And so they obviously, I can't take any argument seriously. Well, it wasn't that big a deal. If it didn't work, y'all wouldn't have kept doing it. That's the reality of it here. So
a couple of things come to mind. I've kind of talked myself into this being incredibly valuable from an offense coordinator perspective, from a check with me. Boy, if you know that defensive signal, and that defense is bring the house, and you got to check with me, and quarterback looks and he goes, let it ride deep middle because there ain't going to be anybody back there to stop it. Boy, I see that's a win. All right. We mentioned the NCAA doesn't have subpoena power. If there's a way this becomes, a United States interstate federal issue, and all of a sudden the feds come in, and they can subpoena, and they can get emails and payment records and texts. And I'm telling you, there's a way this becomes the worst thing about Michigan football in years.
Yeah, that leads me into 2 questions I have. One in regards to the Big Ten is that this allegedly happened against your own conference members that you have a duty to protect. And so, I mean, 21, 22 seasons are over and done. I don't care so much about vacating wins, but the 23 season is happening right now. If you have really good evidence that this happened and is still happening, where's your tipping point to step in and say Michigan is ineligible to play in the Big Ten championship and we're voiding all your wins this season? Where is that line? and who makes that call, and how much is Ohio State and Penn State pressuring you to say, hey, rule them ineligible? Obviously they're interested parties here, but that's one of the biggest questions moving forward to me is we've never seen anything like this happening where the scandal is unfolding in real time and we've got championships and millions of dollars and all that stuff at stake that Michigan, we all thought, was prepared to go win. And so is their next 6 weeks to 2 months in jeopardy now?
That's a great question, Zach. Real quickly, abutting what you just said moments ago, Scott, is that when I talk to those guys through the years that have been signed Steelers, they've always said it was more valuable for the offense than the defense. Like they might say, yeah, our DC might listen to us, 1 out of every 10 things we plan, but our offensive coordinator, our offensive staff is really interested if we feel like we know what's coming from the defense. So I would say that. To your point, Zach, I would say, as you note, it's allegedly transpired against fellow Big Ten residents. I think if you find concrete proof of it right now in this season, you have to act. Like if you find that he has been reimbursed by the University of Michigan, that he has a phone that you get the records for because you opened an inquiry at the NCAA and you can see he's had text messages or communications with other people on staff, other full-time coaches on staff who have endorsed and helped serve as accomplices to his behavior, then I think that's when you have to step in and make a judgment like that.
The other question I have here is not so much a question, but I think one of the victims here, it seems to me, are Michigan fans, because you're in your glory days. You've had your dauber kicked in the dirt by your biggest rival for 15 straight years. You finally break through. It looks like you're the national championship favorite. And regardless of what does or does not happen now, I mean, everything Michigan has accomplished under Harbaugh in the eyes of your rivals has now been tainted. And all of your glory has turned to ash in your mouth because of this scandal. And in the eyes of many, everything, this cheating is the cause of their success. I mean, we've seen the screenshots and the comparisons rolling around. We talked about it earlier of everything they've done from 2015 to 20 versus 21 through now. And you're looking at the one thing you've done since 1997 now being invalid. And I think that's a real bummer if you're a Michigan fan.
I don't feel sorry for him. I'm just
Yeah, I don't know where this goes. I really don't, but I don't think it's good. And I was a little surprised to see them suspend him with pay. We're supporting him.
That's got to be a legalese. That's got to be a legalese boilerplate protect. I mean, if they suspend him immediately without pay, isn't that the biggest admission of guilt of all time? But if you suspend him and say, okay, we're going to remove him, let this investigation play out because we believe in ourselves, then I think that keeps them. It doesn't sound like he's the type of gentleman who would sue in that regard if he's gone to these great lengths to help dear old Michigan. But otherwise, I think that's just standard legal maneuvering to suspend him with pay.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think the implications of this, the subplots are just enormous. You got the fact that Michigan may very well be the best team in the country. You've got the fact that Jim Harbaugh, just the week before this, Michigan was saying they're prepared to make him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten. Do they still do that? Do they have to fire him for cause? Because Michigan is a place that they claim, integrity and ethics aren't just buzzwords for them. Like if they're caught red-handed, do they have to fire him? Does Jim Harbaugh say, you know what, I'm done with Michigan. I'm just going to go to the NFL on my own regard. See, it's been fun. I'll see. I'll catch you on the other side. You have the fact that Jim said this past offseason he thinks Michigan could set the NFL draft record and have 20 guys drafted. So this isn't going to affect that, but you're looking forward to the 24 team. Already is going to have to replace a lot. You might have to replace your head coach. You're looking at, if you're a Michigan fan, we're going to finally win the Natty to, oh my gosh, Jim's gone. All our players are gone. We're going to have a new head coach. We're in the portal area. We might be looking at sanctions. Like we're going to have to hit the reset button come January 1st or whatever. And who knows where that goes. Maybe you go get somebody great. Maybe you don't. Like you're going into everything was laid out in front of you to now everything right in front of you. The path is now just a bunch of fog, and you can't see beyond your own nose.
And I'll be curious as this continues to unfold if Michigan is the only program exposed to have used alleged technological stuff to spy on teams and to steal signals and to gain illicit information. I've heard folks who have been concerned at maybe a Friday walkthrough on a road game that they've seen a drone. They don't know why circling the local high school that they're conducting their walkthrough at. So I think there are a number of elements at play that are causing people everywhere in college football and beyond to watch this because there's so much concern. I think that especially college head coaches with the money involved, the only thing they worry about more than recruiting is being paranoid of what everybody else is doing.
I saw a couple of things that come to mind. One, the concept, the idea of him flipping and him, quote unquote, testifying against Michigan has got to be terrifying for Michigan. So maybe that's why with pay, we got to keep him happy. Who knows? I don't have any idea. I did see a graphic floating around the Twitter in which Michigan has covered just an absurd amount in the last 2 to 3 seasons. I mean, they cover like 80% of the time compared to the 5 seasons prior when they covered, 40%, 30%. So,
yeah, the stat I saw was like every other major program was like 54%, 53%. Michigan was 45%. And then, they were like 66, like a suspiciously high number.
Yep.
Interesting. All right. We'll keep you guys posted. Any closing thoughts, or are we out on this one?
I think we're at the tip of the iceberg here.
That's what I was going to say. The closing thoughts are stay tuned because this isn't going anywhere and we're going to be right there every step of the way.
Doug's saying something great, but he won't let us hear it.
Go back to something JB was saying earlier. The media is uncovering stuff the NCAA didn't even know. So I think the media is the one to watch here. The NCAA, this could take another 10 years before we have a solution. So,
and of course, obviously, the media is getting stuff from other schools. Like you're dumping your Oppo file to the media to get it out there. So I mean, Michigan is surrounded by knives everywhere they turn right now.
Whew. Greatest sport in the land. Glad we get to cover it. Yep. We are the Football Scoop Podcast. Follow us, footballscoop.com. On Twitter, I'll throw some plugs. He's Zach_Barnett. He's John D. Bryce 1. He's at Coach Sam's. I'm Football Scoop. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk soon. Love you, Michigan. Go Blue.